This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Port Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.
Season 10 of what I'm used to saying is Rob Fay Nation Radio, but it's not. It's Vancouver Canadians Game Day. It is powered by Booster Juice, and if you are a baseball fan, this is for you. If you're not, don't worry. We will sprinkle in all the sports. We've got the NHL. We got the NBA. We will not turn a blind eye. It's a sports radio station, so you know we're going to have to do that. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for you and I to get warmed up for the Major League season, the minor league season, and, of course, the Vancouver Canadian season. Season 10. Hard to believe that we've gotten this far. Not that we shouldn't, but we're here, and that's a good thing. Jason Croker's going to ride shotgun. We got a lot of guests that are going to roll through this studio over the next 2 hours. Niall O'Donoghue's going to stop by. Lou Filippo's going to stop by. KP Wee, fresh off of his book about the Los Angeles Dodgers. We're going to talk a little Clayton Kershaw. Some of the greats to have ever suited up for the blue and white with a little accent of red, if you look down at the number on the old jersey. But it is an unbelievably unique organization, maybe the best way to describe it. We're so busy talking about the Blue Jays and the Mariners that I think every once in a while it's kind of cool to lift up the old veil on some of the other teams in Major League Baseball. So if you're a Dodgers fan, be it Brooklyn, Los Angeles, we will get to you tonight for sure. But of course, some of the top stories of the week when it comes to Major League Baseball. Already getting a couple of emails about this. Bryce Harper, home run on a broken bat. You know what I saw the other day? Barry Bonds getting walked with the bases loaded against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Arizona was up by 2, loaded up the bases full of Giants, and were willing to walk Barry Bonds to get to the guy behind him, who ended up lining out to right, and they won the game by 1. But it is amazing that there are players from that age that, of course, were treated with that kind of respect. And you got to wonder if maybe Bryce Harper isn't going to be the next of that generation. So that is going to be one of our questions to you tonight. Could Bryce Harper become the next Barry Bonds? Analytically, they are actually ridiculously similar at where they were at this point in their career. Now, you got to remember, Barry Bonds early on in his career, slender, could still hit the big fly, was one of the best to play the game. He had Bobby Bonilla, who, by the way, I saw down at spring training this year. He is gigantic. One of the biggest men I've ever come across in my life. But anyways, Barry Bonds, analytically right there with Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper's got an unbelievable upside. Some were saying that he's going to get a contract in the $300 to $350 million range. I remember when Alex Rodriguez got his first contract, the first of two $200+ million contracts, and everybody said that's going to be bad for baseball. Bryce Harper might be able to dwarf that before everything is said and done. We're going to get into some of the Major League Baseball free agents for the upcoming season. I know we still got about 140 games to go in this season, but it is a class maybe like no other. You're going to have names like Josh Donaldson, Manny Machado, Clayton Kershaw, Bryce Harper. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But that on its own is probably some of the most top-heavy free agency together in 1 year that we have ever seen. Good for baseball, bad for baseball. I would assume that it probably takes about half of Major League Baseball's teams out of the equation to begin with. Like the Oakland A's aren't going into bidding against the New York Yankees on a guy like Bryce Harper. So let's cut the dead wood early and see which teams can actually take a run at a guy like Bryce Harper. When it comes to free agents internationally, we're also going to talk about that today because the international free agents are some of the most coveted in all of professional sport. Because you look at a guy, free agent-wise, like Clayton Kershaw or Bryce Harper or one day maybe even Mike Trout, and you say to yourself, there really is only set amount of teams that can go out and battle for a player of that dollar value. But then you look at a team like the Mariners, who, gosh, it's been well more than a decade that they went overseas and got Ichiro Suzuki. That is a big free agent signing. You look at Felix Hernandez, a kid that they signed at, 16, 17 out of Venezuela. That's a big free agent signing internationally. So certain teams that are realizing at this stage of where they are in life fiscally are going to stop and not even look. They're going to put the brakes on before they get to Machado, before they get to Bryce Harper, before they even think of a guy like Clayton Kershaw. Because the reality is they just can't get into those bidding wars. It's almost a waste of time. That said, if you put your resources globally into the right markets, there are times where you can cultivate relationships, where you can start to make a little bit of headway and find yourself a guy that could become a guy Remember the Blue Jays back in the 80s? Maybe even dip your toe back into the 70s. They were one of the first organizations of professional baseball to really make a conscious effort to go into the Dominican Republic, set up an academy. They were able to find guys like Alfredo Griffin, Tony Fernandez. I mean, players that ended up giving major contributions to that organization. That was a Paul Beeston production. That was a Pat Gillick production. It is harder in this day and age to scour parts of the world that are really unknown. Some would say you might want to look at Australia. Some might say you want to look into the Netherlands. I mean, you say Australia, the Netherlands, but that is this era's Dominican Republic. That is this era's, undiscovered talents. Greg Hallman was a guy that was taken out of the Netherlands a couple of years ago by the Seattle Mariners. May he rest in peace. Hallman almost got to the major leagues and was a guy that the Mariners had a very high ceiling for, and eventually actually passed away well too early. But I sit here and I say to myself, where is the next untapped resource globally when it comes to potential Major League Baseball players, so that teams like Oakland, teams like the Angels, I shouldn't even put the Angels. Angels do have a little bit of money, but Minnesota and even to some extent Toronto, where do they start turning rocks over in order to be able to go out and compete with teams that do have endless amounts of money and are willing to pay luxury taxes so that they can go out and get themselves a marquee team? We will definitely talk about it. Our Subway Fresh Take poll question tonight. This one caught me by surprise, and it shouldn't, because when you're a manager of a team that is 3-15, yeah, the vultures start swirling. But I still find it amazing that 18 games into a Major League season, which is 162 games, that an organization is willing to fire their manager. Did you not know 2.5 weeks earlier that he might not have the horses, that he might not be the guy? I mean, it's the 4th season for manager Brian Price before he gets fired. Jim Riggleman will take over in that duty for at least the rest of the season. He's got the old interim tag. But that's our Subway Fresh Take poll question tonight. You can find it at Rob Fination Radio. We'll have it up at tsn1040.ca in a couple of seconds. But hit me up online at Twitter at ROB, F as in Frank, AI Nation. Is 18 games too early to fire a manager, even if he stubs his toe out of the gates? Because let's be honest, there's so much yardage that he can still make up some ground. We saw the Blue Jays last year get off to a dreadful start, 1-9. John Gibbons should have been fired, according to some. But at the same time, they held the course. He's back this year, and all of a sudden, the Blue Jays look like a much different team. Right now, you know what? I love when we get poll questions that are pretty split down the middle. And this one is absolutely that. Early on, there were a lot of people that were saying, yeah, it's definitely too early. But already, and we just put this up a couple seconds ago, more than 160 votes, and only 55% of you are saying yes. My goal as a broadcaster is to make sure that every poll question is 50-50, because that's when you know you got yourself a good topic and you're off and running. So right now, 55% of you are saying, yeah, 18 games into a 162-game season, a little too early to pull the trigger. 45% are saying, hey, you're 3-15, pull the chute early. I mean, even though they're 9 games out of first already, speaking about the Cincinnati Reds, at least you can get this cleaned out early. You can get your team right. And again, still have a lot of rope to try and make up the ground. So again, obviously Cincinnati didn't have the faith in Brian Price, even though it was his 4th season as manager of the Reds. They have gone to Jim Riggleman, who of course has Major League experience, and they will see what Riggleman could do through at least the remaining portion of the season. Try the new Greek Collection 100% Canadian rotisserie, rotisserie style season chicken. You can do it with steak as well. Feta cheese, creamy tzatziki, tomatoes, and cucumbers. You can do it all for a limited time at Subway. A couple of seconds away from KPW, our first of a handful of baseball insiders tonight. We will talk about the news of the week and the insights of, I guess, maybe the first 2.5 weeks of Major League Baseball. One of the first things that I have noticed is the attendance in Major League venues. Certain venues look like an absolute barren wasteland. Now, you can attribute that all you want to, of course, the cold climate that is absolutely whacking the Northeast right now. But at the same time, is baseball doing too good a job? Are the networks doing too good a job? Where people who used to go and find their scarf and their mitts, all of a sudden they're saying, screw it, we're just going to stay inside. We're joined by baseball insider KP Wee, fresh off of his latest endeavor, which is writing a book about the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's also written a biography on Tom Candiotti, the old knuckleballer. KP, good evening. How are you?
Doing well, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. I hope we can make this a regular occurrence. Before we get to, yeah, me too. Before we get to, well, hopefully I'll be here. I'm sure you'll be here. It's me that I'm worried about. KP, let's talk a little bit about the state of baseball today. Before we get into the Los Angeles Dodgers, which is quickly becoming your forte with regards to that championship team from 1988, which is, by the way, the 30th anniversary of that. Actually, KP, can you believe it's been 30 years since Kirk Gibson and the Dodgers of '88? That blows my mind.
Yeah, time has certainly passed by. And you think about even the Blue Jays of Joe Carter, that's 25 years ago.
Yeah, no kidding.
Time flies.
Well, let's talk about the state of baseball today, because that era, when it was the Blue Jays, of course, with their back-to-back world championships, and the Dodgers and the A's, I mean, that to some guy in my age range is probably cool beans. But in this day and age, baseball has changed so dramatically much. I don't know if you caught the Facebook Live game the other day that had the Blue Jays and the Kansas City Royals, but obviously there are so many facets of baseball that are changing. Is baseball changing too quickly, or is baseball not changing quick enough?
Well, depending on which era you're talking about, but now we have interleague play, which I think lots of fans and players enjoy. We still have, the DH in the American League, no DH in the National League, which again, that's debate for sure. Guys are, throwing harder these days, and last year, of course, it was the year of the home run with major league high number of home runs hit. It's a different ballgame nowadays. Like pitchers just because of the contracts, they don't get to pitch complete games anymore. It's 5-6 innings and they're done. It's baseball has changed quite for sure, and that's what happens when when you were in a different era.
I want to bring up Shohei Ohtani because I know, obviously, he is... It's funny, even the poolies, even guys that are in fantasy baseball didn't know what he was going to be. Was he going to be a pitcher? Was he going to be a hitter? He's been a little bit of both, and he's been pretty doggone decent at both. What do you make of Shohei Ohtani? Is he the only hybrid that you think we'll see? Or now, because of Shohei Ohtani, will we start to see more guys, trying their hand at both sides of baseball?
I think it depends on his success. I mean, obviously, we're only like a couple of weeks into the season, and what he has done so far has been, I guess, historic. No one's done that before in terms of, his home runs, and also, pitching-wise, not even Babe Ruth, I read, had done what he's accomplished in his first 10 games of his career. But it's still early, and there's been a lot of hype. I just think that it depends on how he's going to do this year over the course of the full season, because we don't know, he was injured last year, wasn't he? And is he going to survive the full major league schedule? That's still the question that hasn't been answered yet. And he left his last start early because of blisters, but is he going to be able to, stay healthy the full season? I know in Japan they play like a shorter schedule, so there are a lot of question marks. I think to answer your question, it depends on how he does, and if he succeeds, over the course of 162 games, maybe you might see these hybrid players that you talked of. But we'll just have to see.
Mike Scioscia is the manager of the Angels. Mike Scioscia was also on the '88 Dodgers team that went on to play for that World Series. Now, I know that you've looked in specifically on this team as you do this biography on the 30th anniversary of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Is there anything of the player Mike Scioscia that has translated to him being a good manager, one of the longest tenured managers in all of Major League Baseball?
From speaking to the former players on that team, I actually didn't get a chance to speak to Scioscia personally, but from speaking to other teammates on that 88 team, Rob, they were saying that, when he was an active player, he was always on the bench, calling plays, giving Tommy Lasorda, the manager at that time, advice on what should be done. Hey, Tommy, we should hit and run here. Tommy, we should steal base here, do some double stealing. So it seemed like when he was a player, Mike Scioscia was always kind of thinking like a coach, thinking maybe like 2 steps ahead of time, what needs to happen. And as far as I've heard, he called a great game, being the catcher, and he had a long career, with the Dodgers in that position, being the catcher, and they had a lot of great pitchers during that era that he played in.
He was 29 years old the year that they won the World Series. He made $1 million and was the 5th highest paid player on that team. The only reason I bring that up is because I think of what a guy like Shohei Ohtani got paid, and he hadn't even pitched in Major League Baseball. That's becoming obviously a growing concern. I want to get to free agency, and especially what is coming up this year with a guy like Clayton Kershaw. Obviously, we're bouncing around from the Dodgers of past to the current Dodgers, but I would say that if you were to put down the Mount Rushmore of Dodgers pitchers historically, that Clayton Kershaw's probably got his bust up there on the mountain. Is he going to stick around with the Dodgers? Do you see him on that Mount Rushmore of greats to have ever pitched in Los Angeles?
Well, I mean, obviously he's right up there with Sandy Koufax, and in fact, MLB.com has, of course, listed him as, the top pitcher in all of baseball for this year. That's a no-brainer. And being, the top starting pitcher in the game, you would think that he would, want the top dollar if, when he gets to free agency. That's what a lot of players choose to do, like, test the free agency waters and see what kind of contract they can get. I think that for any athlete, it's true over the years. Like if they're at the top of their business, or at the top of the top in the league, in the big leagues in this case, he's going to want top dollar. And I don't have any inside information, but that's just my feeling, just from following baseball over the years. The guy's going to command top dollar for sure.
KP, before we let you go, I want to cover a couple more topics when it comes to Major League Baseball. This was a great question. It was brought up the other day, and the records haven't changed so much since it was brought up. Who's the bigger surprise this year? Is it the Boston Red Sox, or is it the New York Mets?
I would say that the Red Sox are, just because you think about it, they've only lost 2 games so far this year. They just killed the Angels over the last 2 nights, like by combined score of 19-1. No one would have expected that because, the Yankees are in the same division. You would have thought that the Yankees would be the ones that are, that would be 15-2 or playing 800 baseball, whatever. But as far as the bigger surprise is concerned, that would be Boston, just because it's basically in Boston, you're expected to win, but with the Mets, you're kind of like, if you do well, great. You're not expected to succeed. Even though the Mets do have a great pitching staff, that with Boston, like opening day when manager Alex Cora pulled Chris Sale after 6 innings, and the bullpen blew that game, and there was all sorts of criticism around opening day in his first game as a manager. They could have just crumbled, but they've been winning. They've only lost 1 game since opening day so far. I mean, it's still early in the season, but you're talking about the bigger surprise between the 2 teams, I would say the Red Sox have been. And again, they beat Shohei Ohtani on Tuesday, the guy that we were just talking about, beating the Angels convincingly. I think nobody would have seen that coming.
KP, I want to get into this real quick before we got to let you go. I appreciate it. We're up against the clock. When it comes to closers, I don't know if you're pro-closer or anti-closer. I've always felt that they're still very valuable to a baseball team because of how they can solidify a victory, or at least keep it right where it is. Roberto Osuna, more than 100 saves already in his major league career. I put him up against the great closers, the Riveras, the Hoffmans of the world. None of the greatest closers in Major League Baseball had a single save before the age of 25. Osuna is 23, and he's got more than 100 saves. If you're the Blue Jays, do you keep him in that role for the rest of his career?
If I were the Blue Jays, I would, just because, again, that he's young and that's the role that he's accustomed to. These days, teams groom their pitchers to be in certain roles, and if he's doing well in that role, keep him in it. If he does start to struggle, which happens, all pitchers go through slumps, that you might have to reconsider. But for now, why not?
KP, great stuff, man. I appreciate you doing this on the debut of Season 10 of Vancouver Canadians Game Day. We've got so much to talk to, but I appreciate you making time for me. And next week, come on in the studio and let's hang out for a bit. Sound good?
All right. You got it, Rob. All
right. There he is, KP Wee, the guy that took the time to spend multiple weeks in one room with Tom Candiotti. It's such a great story. I wish we still had KP on the air. We're up against the clock here for our first break. He basically just cold called Tom Candiotti and said, "Hey, I'm KP Wee. I write books. I'd love to do your autobiography." And Tom Candiotti goes, "Well, I'm not doing anything. Come on down." And ended up making a book out of it. We'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. Jose Bautista is on the verge of being back in the major leagues. Alex Anthopoulos came out today and said, do not expect Jose Bautista or Joey Bats to be in the minors for long. As soon as his conditioning is there, he will be in the Braves lineup. What does that mean to Atlanta? And if Jose Bautista does well, do Blue Jay Nation sit back and say, what if we'd assigned him to one more year? Lou Filippo joins us on the other side. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day tonight on TSN 10. The ride, if you're driving home on Highway 1, maybe stuck in traffic on 99, keep it locked right here. We're going to talk all sports. We do dabble into baseball. I mean, it is Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Canadians will open up the season on June the 20th, so still got a little bit of time between now and then. We will give some tickets away to the home opener before the show is done, so keep your fingers close to the phone, but make sure if you're driving, you're doing it hands-free. Lou Filippo has been a friend of Vancouver Canadians Game Day for, near the entire decade that we've been on the air. We had to scour far and deep to find Lou, but we have managed to get him into the studio. Lou, how are you, fella?
I'm doing good, Rob.
We were the co-host of the show for season 1.
Season 1.
Right out of the gates.
Yep.
And look at where we are today.
Sunday afternoon.
Right beside the blenders.
Yeah.
So this show has been powered by Booster Juice, and we say that because it is now just a part of the DNA of the show. Booster Juice has been so kind to us over the years, taking care of us, but we used to do this show on location. So they would put us at different Booster Juices, be it downtown or maybe in Kitsilano or out in Burnaby, where have you. But they would always set us up right beside the blenders. So you would get into this hot topic and you'd be talking about, the inner workings of baseball, and then all of a sudden somebody would order like a funky monkey and the blender would go on and you'd just be like, oh my God. So we are back in the lush, lavish confines of the TSN 1040 studios, and we're thrilled that we've kind of got the upgrade, for lack of a better phrase. But we used to get free smoothies, so there's that.
I'll miss the Cornwall location. Nothing like squeezing underneath one of those tables.
Yes.
Trying to operate the board.
That's kind of what it was. All right, so Jose Bautista is back in baseball. Of course, he sold it during spring training as then he had options. I'm just weighing it out, seeing what's out there. And everybody assumed that it would be Tampa Bay. There was a part of me in the back of my head that thought, if Alex Anthopoulos has some money, has some wiggle room, and maybe an injury strikes, that Joey Bats would be a guy that he would take a look at, because there is that connection between the two. Although taking Jose Bautista at his age, putting it back in the National League, I don't know where you fit him. So anyhow, the Braves sign him. They say, quote unquote, he's going to be a third baseman, which you have to go almost back to the beginning of his career to see him play in that position. Is this a fit for Jose Bautista? I mean, he's back in baseball in a division where I don't think the Braves are going to make the postseason, but do you see that as a fit for him for this season?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting place to go, because you would have assumed he'd go to an American League team so that they can play him at DH, and then put him where they put all poor fielders to play left field. Third base on a National League team, to me, is really, really surprising, because, of course, the strategy is very, very different in National League Baseball. The guy in the 9-hole is going to be bunting half the time, which means he's going to have to charge in and make a play. I can't envision him staying at third very long. Maybe they'll shift him to the outfield. But all things being equal, the price is pretty good. You don't need to get a lot of production out of him. And I know there's been a lot of questions about his leadership, but Alex Anthopoulos would know him about as well as anybody. And if he's the guy making that signing, I think maybe he's onto something.
The last time that Jose Bautista technically played third base, you do have a little bit that you could say he did in 2017. He played 8 games at third base for the Toronto Blue Jays. So it is not as if it has never happened. Mm-hmm. But I mean, a bona fide third baseman, selling that to a Braves organization is interesting. When I look at Jose Bautista, there's 2 things that I will look at. I mean, and we're not getting into bat flips. We're not talking about the stuff that he did in key situations, because he is one of the greatest Toronto Blue Jays in franchise history. You cannot take that away from him. But the way that he misplayed his last contract negotiation is something that I think will stick with him for a little while. And then the fact that I don't want to say he became salty in his last year or two, but the whole public premise of him saying that he gave the Blue Jays the discount the first time around and now he was afforded that money on the back end of that to me, I think, struck a chord with more than just a fan base. I think there were some GMs out there that were like, do I really want to bring that type of a personality, or at least that type of a thought process, into my clubhouse? But again, if you can hit, they will always find a place for you.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the major leagues and you start to go on, it's like any professional sport league, and you start to talk about the money that you are entitled to, it generally goes downhill from there. And if people remember, and revisionist history is here and there, that contract was given to him based off of 1 season. That was actually a big risk by the Blue Jays as well in that age. Now, they happen to come out pretty good out of it, but yeah, you want to talk about misplaying the contract field. Boy, that's got to be right up there when you go from really having an opportunity to sign a multi-year deal, at reduced money, to signing a 1-year $1 million minor league contract. And he's not getting another big contract after this. That's not.
Well, he did get $500K from the Blue Jays as the buyout, so there's that as well. But I don't think Jose Bautista is hurting for money. His career earnings are $103 million. But I think Jose thought he was going to get that in one final contract a couple of years back. He didn't. Edwin didn't. And again, I hope that in some way, shape, or form, I haven't looked, I should have, at the Blue Jays schedule this year. I'm not sure if they play the Braves. Do they? They do. That will be an interesting homecoming if, in fact, that is in Toronto. Again, I'll look at that. We'll have the answer before the end of the segment. Okay, let's move around because there's a lot of stories right now. Everybody wants to know who is the team that can knock off the Houston Astros, because I look at that rotation in Houston and I say, boy, that's the best that I've seen in a while, and they upgraded in the offseason. Mm-hmm. Boston is formidable. Again, if they can stay healthy, I'm always weary of a rotation that pitches in the Northeast, that deals with the cold. And, of course, you start to see David Price getting a little longer in the tooth. And I think that of the teams that are far exceeding their expectations right now, Boston is the bubble that might burst. I can't believe that they're going to play a 750 clip of baseball this whole season, much less 700. But again, we'll see how they do. A team that's intriguing to me is the Angels, because they are off everybody's radar. They still have one of, if not the best player in baseball in Mike Trout. Mm-hmm. They've got a very intriguing player, a two-way player in Shohei Ohtani. And again, they are an organization that is off of everybody's radar because A, they play in the division with the Astros, and B, you're so infatuated with New York and what Boston is doing right now that they're a team that when you look at them analytically is as good as anybody in Major League Baseball right now, but just again, flying under the radar.
Well, the question, and if I was to pick a team, it would also be Anaheim as well. Now, we have no idea what we're going to get out of Ohtani for the course of a season. But even if you were to take him out of that, that's a pretty stacked lineup. The question with them is going to be pitching. Now, Garrett Richards, starting off the season, hey, you know what? He's actually pitching pretty well again. And if their pitching can come through, they can certainly stay with Houston maybe pick up the wild card. Is it going to help them in a playoff when you have a shortened rotation? No. And that's one thing where Boston, as much as I hate to say it as a Blue Jay fan, if Rick Porcello can keep this up, he won a Cy Young a couple of years ago, and David Price with his newfound delivery off of the other side of the rubber, that's a pretty good 1-2-3, which can shelter you against a lot of big bats. But Houston, oh, come on. That's really good.
Well, the Red Sox are in a division where you're going to get Baltimore 19 times, the Rays 19 times, but then you could make the same case in the American League West where you get teams like Oakland, and I don't know if I'm ready to put my eggs in the Mariners basket yet. We'll save that for a question or two from now, but again, I look at that organization as a little long of the tooth outside of maybe a James Paxton. When I look at the New York Yankees, the one thing that I think is it's the first time in, several years where they have looked at themselves as true, legitimate contenders for a World Series. I mean, you go off in the offseason and get yourself Giancarlo Stanton, you immediately put yourself in the conversation. But if you remove yourself a couple of years from where they are today, Brian Cashman, in the sports mecca of North America in New York, actually did something very uncharacteristic as a New York Yankees executive. They actually receded on the spending. They actually did the things that you would see a smaller or mid-market team do by, inheriting draft picks or not draft picks, but finding ways to build within their own organization as opposed to just going out and buying the best, sexiest player available. And it's paid off, even for one of the highest spending teams in the history of Major League Baseball. When you look at a team like the Blue Jays or the Mariners, who can't go into those waters outside of a Robinson Cano, which is a once in a 5 or 6 year signing, how does the Blue Jays compete with the fact that now the Yankees can beat you either way? They can go out and outspend you, but they've also got a better minor league system than you do, or at least have had for the last couple of years to get where they are right now.
You have to look really at Houston as being the model. And this is becoming true in all professional sports.
But Houston had number ones overall. They had Market Powell, they had Carlos Correa. That argument to me holds a certain amount of water, but they also were the Edmonton Oilers of Major League Baseball for a couple of years, where they were so bad, tanking, quote unquote, for lack of a better phrase, that argument only holds certain water. You look at what the Yankees have done, not to cut you off here, but I just want to make sure that we're putting texture to this. The New York Yankees have been able to build their current roster in addition to signing a guy like Giancarlo Stanton, which is not easy to do. But you look at guys like Gary Sanchez, Aaron Judge. I mean, guys that they've actually cultivated, which is so uncharacteristic of the Yankees, which makes them a little more dangerous if I'm a Blue Jay fan, because now they can grow them as much as they can buy them. That, to me, is scary.
Well, Brian Cashman actually had a really good thing to follow, and that was the Yankees of the mid-'90s, where they had the homegrown players, and then they filled them in with veterans like Paul O'Neill, Jim Leyritz. They brought in a couple of pitchers. But you think about that: Pettit, farm; Posada, farm; Jeter, farm; Rivera, farm. And they understand that whole idea of bringing your stars you're going to get from the farm system, and then occasionally you'll get lucky and trade for one. Stanton fell into their lap. That's an outlier entirely. I mean, no one expected him to literally get dumped like that. And Boston really isn't that far off from the same path, at least in the field. They have quite a few homegrown players, but once again, they've got the money to spend. And they also have the farm system to give away good prospects and get a guy, like Chris Sale.
In about 20 minutes' time, we're going to talk with Niall O'Donoghue, who's going to just absolutely help me rip through the minor league system. Then we're all going to come back together at 8:30, and we're going to talk about this as a collective, because the reason that I brought up the Yankees is they can do the one thing that the Blue Jays can't do, and that's go out and buy a bona fide megastar. That said, I'd be very curious to know if Niall is willing to put his money where his mouth is and say that the Blue Jays' current minor league system is as good as what the Yankee system was just a couple of years ago, when everybody was touting that they had one of the best. Baseball America touted them as having one of the best systems in all of baseball. Have the Blue Jays gotten at least to that level? We'll take a break here. When we come back, we're going to reset this. There are a couple of young, bright lights in Major League Baseball that are starting to take center stage. And no, they're not named Bryce Harper, and no, they're not Mike Trout. But when we come back, what did you think of Facebook Live's broadcast of the Toronto Blue Jays game? There are two schools of thought here, because Sportsnet knows that they missed out on a game where they could have had 200, 250, 300,000 viewers. Facebook, no relation to FaceNet. That's a good idea. Maybe I should coin that phrase. What I was saying is they topped out at like 71,000 viewers. There were a couple of things in the broadcast I really liked. There were a couple of things that I would have found very annoying. I would love to hear from you at 604-280-1040. On the other side, Lou Filippo, myself, Niall O'Donoghue, still coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. This is the revamped Vancouver Canadians Game Day here on TSN 1040. Right here on Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget the Vancouver Canadians open up the 2018 season. The defending Northwest League champions open up on June the 20th. Tickets are currently available at CanadiansBaseball.com. One thing we will do over the course of this show, we're going to give some tickets away. We're not going to do it right now, but we will definitely do it in the 8 o'clock hour, so keep the phone close by or your mobile device, and you too could win tickets. A very hard ticket to get in this day and age out at Nat Bailey Stadium, but I want to make sure that you can join us for opening day. Lou Filippo, kind enough to join us here, and hopefully we can make this a weekly segment with Big Lou. Lou has been here since day one of this fine show, which is now entering its 10th season. And Lou, 10 years ago, if I'd have told you that the Toronto Blue Jays and Major League Baseball was getting ready to broadcast baseball games, Major League Baseball games on Facebook, you might have questioned my sobriety.
Well, I still actually question the sobriety of the choice of still putting a game on Facebook.
Do you really?
You know what?
I could kind of see that coming down the pipe.
I understand that a lot of the social media companies are looking at live sport properties because they're good for generating, viewers. But I mean, and I will always be the kind of person that says, you know what, a professional sports team has a certain license with the city and their fans to make the games available on standard media, I guess. I couldn't imagine why. I need to have one heck of a monitor to watch it on Facebook. And, the idea of popping on the TV, going to the channel and turning on the game still resonates with me, but I'm an old schooler in that sense.
Okay, here's the two arguments, because we've only got a couple of minutes here. Old school argument is, why would I have to sign in, give up my personal information just so that I can log on and watch a baseball game, which you would actually have to do with MLB.com as well. That's what it is. The other side, and this is what the millennials, which is what everybody's trying to do. Everybody wants the 13-year-old kid sitting in the backseat of the car because they are the next generation. And I have a 15-year-old son, I have a 13-year-old daughter. What do? They're always buried under their phone looking at different websites and what have you as far as social media goes. So the one thing, because you know what, I don't know if I liked it either for the whole part, but the one thing that I found kind of engaging is the fact that you can type something onto the screen and say, hey, what happened there with that play? And then all of a sudden the broadcaster acknowledges what you said. Well, now I'm engaged because now I feel like I've got a direct line to a Major League Baseball broadcast. And that's one of the knocks on the big four sports in North America, is these players, as we get into this new era of sports, are less approachable, less accessible. You can't get conversations the way that you could. I mean, listen to Tony Gallagher on this station rant about how nobody can get access to players anymore. This, to me, seems to be this weird 21st century streamline to actually have a conversation with a Major League broadcaster that can answer a question that you have. That said, you could also put, send nudes, and that also would have gotten on TV, or on Facebook, which, is Jason Croker grimaces on the other side of the glass, is an actual fact. So there are obviously kinks to be worked out, but progress made.
I'm not sure if I would consider that progress, though.
The send nudes part, or just the Facebook thing?
Well, the send nudes for sure. That generally doesn't work out well. Just ask the fellow south of the border. But I think there needs to be a real separation of the fan engagement, which is very, very important. But to have it built into the broadcast like that, I just kind of it just struck me as being extremely odd, and it wasn't my thing. I want to turn the game on, turn the radio on, listen to the broadcaster, and take in the actual game. I think, as is, there's already a little bit too much involvement by I'm not going to say fans. I'm going to say wannabe experts, and leave it to the guys who know what they're doing. When you're doing a broadcast, you do your broadcast. And that, to me, as a baseball fan, I grew up listening to Tom and Jerry, little radio on the side stand there, and I want to hear Tom and Jerry call the Blue Jays. I want to hear Rob call the Canadians. I don't want to hear Sid from, New West comment on the game.
Yeah. Yeah,
but that's
cool
me.
Fun. I would love to hear from you guys in the second hour at 604-280-1040. If you're driving around, what do you think of the concept of Major League Baseball going on Facebook? The one thing that I will say, and I know it's not public just yet, but it popped up in my head the other day. Think of the information that Facebook is grabbing from you as you watch that game, because they know how long you're on, they know all your information, and I want to say that, was it Mark Zuckerberg, the creator of Facebook, was in front of Congress just days ago talking about how they're trying to keep information as private as can, and now you got to log on just to watch a baseball game. So again, 601, half a dozen the other. I like the progress. Lou likes the old school. Love to hear from you. We need a tiebreaker. So we're going to switch from Major League Baseball. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, the Toronto Blue Jays have one of the most intriguing minor league systems maybe that they in the history of their existence, going all the way back to 1977. Niall O'Donoghue is going to join us and break this down, because it is much more than just Bo and Vladdy. This is an organization that right now can compete. The only question is, can they compete today, or will it be in 2020? How far are Bo and Vladdy away from the major leagues? And who else can we look at on the horizon if you're a Toronto Blue Jays fan? Vancouver Canadians Game Day pushes forward into its second hour next, right here on TSN 10. Hour 2 of Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered as always by Booster Juice. We're so glad to have you along for the ride. And coming up at the end of this hour, Rob Fay Nation Radio. Yes, where we will get into the entire day of sports. We'll talk NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. Yes, the Leafs lost tonight. They're down 3-1, but you have little faith. You never know. Actually, I don't think they're going to beat Boston 3 straight times. All right. So we have talked Major League Baseball for the past hour, but one of the most intriguing storylines when it comes to the entire Toronto Blue Jays organization is their minor league system, because right now it is littered with prospects that you can genuinely say you could see playing at Rogers Center one day. Now, I don't know if it's 2014, 2015, where their general manager, the former general manager, Alex Anthopoulos, depleted the system, but it's been built back up over the last couple of years. And here to talk about it with me is Canadians insider Niall O'Donoghue. Niall, how are you today?
Very good, Rob, and thank you.
You got to turn the...
Well, that might help, right? There.
Yeah,
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
There we go. Rookie mistake right off the bat.
That's
yes.
okay, man.
Yes.
You're welcome to have one. You get one. That's the one. So I wanted to talk a bit about the Blue Jays organization, because obviously here in Vancouver, we have a direct connection to the Blue Jays system. If you're a Mariners fan, bear with me. I promise we're going to get there. But when it comes to the Toronto Blue Jays right now, you look at where they're at right now. Josh Donaldson, Troy Tulowitzki. I don't know if Josh is coming back. I don't know if he's going to go sign somewhere else. Troy Tulowitzki will ever be healthy. But you look at those two positions in particular, and I'm going to start with the left side of the infield. I think if you didn't have what's in the minor league system percolating, you might have more concern. But I feel this weird sense of calmness with Blue Jay Nation, knowing that Bo and Vladdy are on the way. Do you share that sentiment and that ease?
I do. I mean, the farm system has gotten so much better. You know, when you look at what Alex Anthopoulos did to raid the minor league system, of course, it turned out to be worth it in the end. It resulted in 2 playoff appearances, 2015 and 2016. But we kind of saw the effects of what it did for the C's, 2 tough seasons in 2015 and 16 after making the playoffs from 2010 to 2014. So, I mean, things are getting so much better. I mean, we saw the results of that last year here in Vancouver with the C's beating Eugene in Game 4 of the Northwest League Finals. So certainly, I think certainly brighter days ahead for the organization. And of course, Vlad and Bo, of course, we did not get to see them here in Vancouver.
No kidding. Oh, trust me, I know. I hear it all the time for the guys at Lansing. They give me the gears for that one.
Yeah.
Here's, I look at the Toronto Blue Jays, and you always say to yourself, why can't they go out there and sign the big free agent? And, they're obviously competing against some of the bigger names. But one of the biggest signings in franchise history has to be going out and getting a 16-year-old Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It doesn't get the same grease that it deserves, because obviously it wasn't a major league ready player, but to be able to go and get, and Ken Huckabee down at spring training called him this, a generational player. I don't think that certain baseball fans really appreciate how big that signing was.
It was. And Alex Anthopoulos, I know the one thing he said when he decided to part ways with the Blue Jays, one of the things he said was, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be here to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in a Blue Jays uniform. And, I mean, he will see it, but it's just going to be with a different organization, of course. But he was sad about that. So, I mean, that's how big a deal it was. Of course, a couple of former C's were involved in that transaction, trying to get more pool money so the Jays could sign Guerrero in Tim LoCastro and Chase DeYoung. So
to the Dodgers.
That's right.
For the money, yes.
That's right. So a couple of C's playing playing a role there.
Without getting too technical, can you even put a finger on what that looks like? Like, we're talking about, a lot of people say, well, what does that mean to give away picks for slot money for the international players? Like, certain organizations really rely on this because that is essentially how they try to compete with these big spending teams at the top of the totem pole, is making sure that they got international slot money. I know that the Braves, now that Alex Anthopoulos is with them, got slapped on the wrist and had some of their money taken away. But what does that even mean?
It's another avenue, as you mentioned, another way to try to get more talent in the organization. No, I mean, the Jays aren't going to likely sign guys like Bryce Harper or Manny Machado or
Stanton
yeah, exactly. And this is another way of doing it. I mean, this is really how the Blue Jays got going, really, when they first started out as a franchise. You had Epi Guerrero mining the Dominican Republic for so much talent, like Tony Fernandez, George Bell. I mean, this is really a way of this. Really, the Blue Jays are really the first team to really take advantage of the Dominican market, and it's good to see that, under Alex Anthopoulos, and they're still doing it here. I believe Orelvis Martinez, he's supposed to be a top free agent, and he's been linked widely to the Blue Jays. And once July 2nd rolls around, that's the deadline for these international free agent signings. That's when they turn 16. That's when teams can sign them. So. Yeah, that's why you have to do stuff like this to compete against the Yankees, against the Red Sox, against the Angels. I mean, the big money teams. And this is one way of doing it, and it's an important way of doing it.
So you go out and you get yourself Vladdy Guerrero Jr., and obviously now you've got one of the marquee prospects in all of minor league baseball. Bo Bichette is a year older. Looks like he's 13 as far as his facial features. I'm amazed every time I see him how young he looks, but yet he plays like a man. You hear names like Guerrero Jr., Bichette. Last year, of course, you had a chance to cover Casey Clemens here in Vancouver. Kevin Biggio the year prior. There's 4 key prospects within the Blue Jays organization that all have dads with Major League pedigree, and pretty good Major League pedigree at that. Do you put anything into the DNA of having the son of a former major leaguer? Do you actually put value on that connection?
I think so. And obviously the Blue Jays seem to think so as well. Dwight Smith Jr. in Buffalo, he had a cup of coffee with the Blue Jays last year. That's another name. Brandon Grudzelanek, I know he was in Bluefield. We may very well see him here in Vancouver at some point. Kevin Biggio, I mean, yeah, obviously you wouldn't expect him to be his dad, but boy, I love the way he played when he was here in Vancouver. He always grinded out his at-bats. I mean, he took pitches. I can't remember the name of the Boise closer right now. Hernandez, I believe his name was, throwing 100 miles an hour, and the way Biggio was just able to battle him and get a hit and a walk. I just love the way Biggio played. And Casey Clemens, from what I've heard and for what I saw, probably the best defensive first baseman here in Vancouver since Ryan McBroom. Yeah. I mean, and shows a great eye at the plate, and he's doing even better this year in Lansing. I believe he's drawn 16 walks. And
already.
That's right. Yeah. In 11 games. So, I mean, he shows a good eye at the plate, and he was a good RBI guy last year for the C's. Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to it. I mean, these guys aren't really fazed by, the baseball world, the baseball experience. They've grown up with their dads. They've been in clubhouses, that sort of thing. So they kind of know what to expect when they get here. And I think the Blue Jays are maybe kind of taking a bit of a shortcut, maybe just try to, quicken up the development process, so to speak.
When Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins took over the Blue Jays front office, as far as the draft war room and all the decisions that had to be made, I was real curious to see what they would do in year one. Are they college guys? Are they high school guys? Now, obviously, their hand was a bit forced because of what Alex did to deplete the organization. You have to go get some college guys that if they do half well, you can thrust them into some of those holes that were within the organization. But now, 3 years removed, you have yourself a couple of blue chip prospects. We'll get into the pitchers in a second, the Zoiks, the Pearsons of the world. Does your philosophy change now if you're the Toronto Blue Jays because you've stocked your minor league system to now be one of the best? Do you start to look at guys that, maybe you can keep them in the minor league system a couple of years and draft a couple more 18-year-olds than a couple of years ago when you had to go college heavy?
Well, it's interesting. You got the draft not too far off. The Blue Jays, they've been linked. I was reading a Fangraphs article today saying that they're actually being linked to a couple of high school players. So that would be a bit of a difference. I mean, obviously here in Vancouver, we love the college heavy drafts because
that's what we get.
That's who's going to be coming here. But yeah, it's a good sign that if that's the case, if they are looking at the high school. But then again, I mean, with college players, they're a little bit more polished. You kind of know what you're getting. You have a better idea of what they might be able to achieve. I don't know if they're at that point yet. I think they are getting there. Maybe you might see another draft. They go college heavy again, and then if all goes well, then maybe next year you might might see the high school players maybe more prevalent in the first few rounds of the draft.
You talk of Bluefield as the guys that get the high school guys, we get the college guys, and then they both funnel up towards Lansing and then Dunedin and onward and upward. Niall O'Donoghue, key contributor to this show here right out of the gate. And so glad that you're here on Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. I want to switch gears from the offense, from the Casey Clemens, the Bigios, and all those guys to pitching, because there were a lot of arms that left this organization a couple of years ago. Everybody from Alberto Tirado to Miguel Castro, Jairo Laborde. I mean, it was, I don't want to use the word fleecing because we did get things in return, but it was some marquee guys. And I also remember when Jeff Hoffman was a part of the trade that brought Troy Tulowitzki to Toronto, a lot of guys in the minor league system said, oh, anybody but Hoffman, because he's that kind of a guy that is going to have a great major league career. That said, of course, you can't trade anything for playoff appearances, so all is well. But now, all of a sudden, after a couple of dead arm years, as far as what we saw here in Vancouver, 2015, 2016, you see TJ Zoik out of the University of Pittsburgh, and then you see Nate Pearson, the man-child out of a small school in Florida. It's the first time I can remember since Syndergaard, Sanchez, and Nicolino where I have looked at a player and it took me an inning and I said, that is a major league arm. Are those guys bona fide major league stars, or am I just dreaming because I'm a fan?
No, I think you're onto something there. I think Nate Pearson, of course, man, I mean, him pumping gas at 100, 102 miles an hour, it was unbelievable, but he has a feel for all four pitches, and he's got a great pitcher's frame. I mean, very solid, very sturdy. I think this is a guy who could stand his ground in a tornado. That's how solidly built he is. I couldn't get over the size of him when I first saw him. It was unbelievable. You know, him standing next to Logan Warmoth. I mean, it was a bit of a difference for sure. But yeah, he was incredible. I mean, probably the most talented pitcher I've seen since Marcus Stroman. That's how. Yep. I wasn't here in 2011, unfortunately, so I can only go by what I've seen from 2012 onwards. But definitely super talented. As for TJ Zoik, I definitely think he's a major leaguer in the making. I really liked his composure on the mound. The fact he can generate a ton of ground balls. He's got a fastball. 95, 96, 97, and I don't think he's going to be in Dunedin for too much longer. I'm pretty sure once the weather gets a little bit warmer in New Hampshire, I'm sure we're going to see TJ Zoik there pretty soon.
A lot of people said that the Nate Pearson signing was the best thing that could have happened to TJ Zoik because it took pressure off of him to be the marquee arm within the organizational system. The fact that now you've got a 1 and a 1A, and you can flip a coin as to who's who, because I actually think Zoik is a better, quote, pitcher than Nate Pearson, although Pearson might have some of the more raw tools, and it really does remind you of a guy like Syndergaard and Sanchez, because that was the big 1-2 punch that the Jays had in their system back in 2011. Now, of course, Syndergaard goes to the Mets. Sanchez has made his way through. I would like to think that the Blue Jays are in a place right now where instead of trading off for one final kick of the can, that they're going to keep these two prospects. But that said, the pressure this year on the Blue Jays, if they are hovering around one final hurrah, was Josh Donaldson with the current regime, one of the older ones in Major League Baseball. Would you trade one of those two arms to bring you a piece that can get you to the playoffs?
Wow, that's an incredibly tough call.
Like TJ Zoik in a deal that gets you a bat that puts you in the conversation in the American League East.
If it's Zoik, yes.
Pearson's off limits.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, yeah, I think Pearson's got such a gifted arm. And you know what? I mean, a lot of people cried, and myself especially, about Edwin leaving the nest. But, you know, that's what they got Nate Pearson with, that 28th draft pick, that first round pick as compensation. Of course, now they've taken out the compensation rules. So as far as free agent signing goes, or at least as far as first round picks go. But, yeah, TJ Zoik, maybe but I'd hate to see him go, because I do think he is a major leaguer. I think, you know, he's been compared to, say, Adam Wainwright, kind of a similar build in a way to Roy Halladay. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Can the Jays keep it up? I hope so.
You look at the prospects, the top 10 ones from MLB.com, and yes, I wince as well. Sean Reed-Foley, Nate Pearson, TJ Zoik, Ryan Borucki. That's some pretty good talent that's coming up. Ryan Borucki had a hot and cold spring, but I think he's a bulldog. He's kind of my Justin Nicolino of this last couple of years. But the one thing that doesn't get a lot of praise, and maybe it's because some of my friends within the Blue Jays organizations are former catchers, is right now the Blue Jays have 4 to 5 bona fide future Major League catchers within this organization. I mean, I'm lucky I've got it in front of me. You got Hagen Danner, a former second rounder. You got Riley Adams, a third rounder that we saw last year. Of course, can't say anything without mentioning Danny Jansen. I mean, this is an organization that suddenly has an embarrassment of riches at a position that for years they just didn't have. I mean, Travis d'Arnaud went to the Mets as a part of this Dickey deal. JP Arancibia, you can say what he was, but he was never a bona fide everyday guy at the Major League level. But this is a position now that all of a sudden is a definite asset. And now you combine that with the pitching prospects that they have. Are the Blue Jays now considered, in your estimation, one of the best minor league systems in baseball? Could you put them in the top 5? And I know you don't have knowledge of all 30 in depth, but could you at least put them in that conversation?
I think you could. I know they've been rated 7th, 8th by Baseball America.
But could you bump them up?
But could I think so. I'd say you could. I mean that's a good position to have depth in as catchers. Everybody wants catchers, and look at Max Pentecost. Looks like he might get more playing time actually behind the dish, and hopefully that he can still salvage what was a promising start with Vancouver back in 2014. And I mean, we weren't guaranteed that. I know I say we, but as the C's, I mean, the C's weren't guaranteed to keep him. He may have been promoted, but I thought that was a big bat to lose, especially in 2014. I mean, if they could have kept him, maybe he might have been the difference in that series against Hillsborough. But I mean, you look at
see, now I'm gonna cut you off. I know why we lost this, and I still argue with John Schneider about this. Game 2, they just who was it? Matt Smorrell. They went with Matt Smorrell in Game 2 and left Ryan Baracki and Jairo Laporte on the bench in case there was a Game 3. In case there was a Game 3. You left your 1 and your 1A in hopes that you would get there, and you didn't. And you know what the worst part is in Game 1, taking on Hillsborough, the Canadians had a 5-0 lead. And they lost that Game 1 7-5. Never forget it. Ever as long as I live.
Striker Trahan.
Yes.
That's a name for you. But
I should have a 5th ring. Not that I've earned any of the other 4. Okay. We're going to take a break here a little bit earlier than anticipated, maybe just by a minute or two. Obviously, Niall, you'll stick around. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to open it up. We're going to call this I don't know if you want to call it the caught looking segment. We don't really have a title for this segment yet, but we're going to bring it all together. We're going to bring back Lou Filippo. Niall, you're going to stick with us. Stephen Von Voot is also going to join us, and we are going to talk all things baseball. We're going to bring it around and just make sure that we can talk as much baseball as we can cram into this 2-hour show. This is the new format that we're going to go. We're going to always try to bring you as much information as we can. By the way, my parking is due if you heard my cell phone go off. This is Rob Fay Nation Radio, back with a whole bunch of baseball information for you right here on TSN 10. Fantastic to be back on the air in this capacity talking baseball. Kind of reminds me how close we are to the Vancouver Canadians season. And because we are honoring our 10th season with Vancouver Canadians Game Day powered by Booster Juice, I want to include you in the celebratory atmosphere that we've got here in the studio today. So I'm going to take the 4th caller through at 604-280-1040. That is 604-280-1040. Caller number 4. I have got a 4-pack of tickets to opening night, which is June 20th. Vancouver Canadians will defend their championship. That's the night that you want to be at the ballpark for the simple fact that, you get the pomp and circumstance, you get the banner unveiling, or what do they call it, the unfurling of the banner, what have you. So again, 604-280-1040. We're just going to need your name or number in a way that we can get those tickets out to you. And once we print them off, they will be in your hands and full boards already. So if you've got a busy signal, the only thing that I can say to you is try your best, and good luck to you. And if not, we'll give away some more stuff next week. All right, we're going to switch gears. We're going to load up the bullpen here. I've brought back Lou Filippo. Of course, Niall O'Donohoe is still here. Stephen Von Voot. Boy, we got some names in the studio today. Stephen, how are you, fella?
Good, thanks, Rob. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, we needed some youth. There's a lot. We got a lot of salt and pepper in this studio, so we decided that we would err on the side of caution and bring
salt, pepper, and oregano.
Bring it in.
Yeah, so I want to be salt. If we're salt and pepper, I want to be salt. So.
Interweb expert.
Lou can be Spinderella. So that's a hip hop reference. I don't expect many people to know that.
I didn't get it. Yeah,
it's okay. It's probably because it was before your time. So, Stephen, we were bandying about Facebook Live that this is kind of a thing now in Major League Baseball, that they're starting to dip their toe into the waters. We had differing opinions, at least on our side, as to what we thought about it. But I mean, there were some pros in the fact that you can interact with the broadcast. It's right there on your phone. Yada yada yada. It's free. The con is that it was very unconventional to the naked eye that is used to seeing it on a regular terrestrial television site. Where do you kind of chime in on that thought?
I've got to be on the side of the television. I'm the kind of guy who would like to watch a game just on my TV. I mean, I don't want to go on my phone and watch a baseball game. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think it's unconventional, like you mentioned. I'm the kind of guy who would like to, if you're not at the ballpark, you want to watch it on a TV. You get a better experience that way, I think. And I honestly didn't even hear about the Facebook Live with the Blue Jays. So, I mean, I feel like they're missing out to those types of fans.
Well, they definitely had fewer viewers based on the fact that Sportsnet has their projected numbers per game, and it was a fraction Facebook. But to me, I say, well, there's two sides of the coin to that. This was really Facebook's first go around with this, whereas Sportsnet's been entrenched in Blue Jay baseball. They've got all the faculties at their availability. I mean, give it a little bit of time, and maybe something like that comes to the forefront. Maybe you'll get a little more equalness.
I still have a hard time seeing it really actually succeeding in the long term unless they can actually secure rights. Because I think the true fan, and I realize they're always trying to get the new fan, get the younger people. The younger people who are fans of baseball are going to watch baseball. How do you get that? I think you make the game cool, you make it trendy, you make it exciting. The only major sport right now with improving TV numbers is the NBA. Why? It's cool, it's exciting. And that's what baseball needs to do, and then they will get that younger viewer, and they're going to watch on TV.
The one thing I can't remember is, did they play commercials in between breaks, or did it simply say game resumes in a minute like they do with Major League Baseball.com? Reason being is, I remember down at spring training, everybody was talking about pace a game. There's clocks, there's limited visits to the mound, there's all these things to spruce up the game, get it quicker. Josh Donaldson, during their meeting with the media, said, well, think about all of the 2-minute delays that we have in our game waiting for the 5th commercial to be finished. Mm-hmm. If you were to cut it down to 2 commercials, that saves you 9 to 10 minutes in a broadcast. Is there any credibility or, thought on that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, especially in the postseason when you have games going on till 12, 1, even in the West Coast. I mean, that's kind of the blessing about being here in the West Coast. I mean, we can kind of get to bed at a decent hour, but I think. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought here.
That's okay.
Well, when you go to a sporting event live, you actually experience those commercial breaks, and some of them can be unbelievably long. And when you're at a Canadiens game, for example, 90 seconds between innings, and that's pretty quick. You go to a Major League Baseball game, it's 3-4 minutes. And really those breaks do actually take away from the pace of the game. And you see it in every sport. In the NBA, you get all the timeouts at the end. In the NFL, you get all the timeouts. Here's some commercials. Major League Baseball could easily shrink down the game by, cutting out some of the ads and maybe using banners.
Okay, we're talking about this in live context, Steve, and I will come back to you when it comes to Jays in 30, for example. And I know here at a TSN station, I don't want to give too much grease to other people, but now you've got a handful of, networks that decide, we'll broadcast the game in its entirety, and then we will condense it. Are you on that boat, or are you off that boat? Oh, yeah,
I'm on that boat. The Jays in 30 was definitely something that I jumped on, and I know me and my dad would, if you either didn't watch the full game, you could just jump in and get your quick little 30 minutes, okay, everything happened.
Would you watch Canucks in 30?
Yeah, I would, for sure. I think the intermissions are too long in the NHL, too. Like, same thing with commercial breaks. I mean, the NFL... this year they lost me almost because every single 5 minutes
play.
there's a kickoff, then you got a commercial, and then everything, there's an injury, you got a commercial. There's so I would definitely be interested in Canucks in 30. I'm interested in the Blue Jays in 30. I think it's a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know MLB, I don't know if they still do this. I remember they used to condense the games if you subscribe to MLB TV.
Correct. Yes.
That they would condense it to what happened on every pitch or the pitches that were put in play. That's a great idea. Certainly a Jays in 30 is a great idea, and especially great, if you have a shift that isn't exactly 9 to 5, or you don't start early in the day. I'll be quite honest, I probably watch more Mariners games than I do Blue Jays games, and the only way to catch up is Jays in 30.
But don't you lose some of the eloquence of a broadcast? And I say this as a guy that has broadcasted, because I sit there and I think, the one thing that you're losing in this day and age when it comes to a play-by-play guy is the stories that come behind the scenes and stuff like that. Because, sure, I want to see the double down the line, and I'm looking at my watch, I only got 20 minutes, maybe I can get as many of these highlights in, but I don't feel the game anymore the way that I used to. And, that's why, and just to circle up and finish this on Facebook Live, they've got an opportunity to recapture a broadcast in a new style, because one of the things that they do on Facebook Live is you can see your comments in real time on screen. A lot of people feel a bit of a disconnect with baseball players, with front office executives and what have you, and every once in a while you'll get this Facebook Live style where you can actually have somebody respond to you. If I'm a young viewer, and I shouldn't even say young viewer, if I'm a viewer that is willing to engage with the broadcast, and then all of a sudden get a response to my broadcast. We do it here at the radio station. Somebody texts into 104040. It's our job to respond to that text. That's engagement. That's interaction. I think that's what all major markets are still looking for.
I said this earlier in this segment, and I think when you're having a show format like this, I think that's awesome, right? In the course of a broadcast, I really want to be focused on the broadcast. You brought up the issue of stories, and you are absolutely right. But the problem isn't that the stories aren't there. The problem is that there seems to be this need to fill the viewer or the listener with numbers instead of atmosphere, instead of feeling. And that's how you engage in baseball. It is a paced game. You don't need to. We used to talk about 3 numbers. Average, home runs, RBIs. Now when a guy comes up, we know his JAWS number, whatever that means, and his WAR plus, and this, and that. That's all information that the viewer or the listener can get. Give them the story. Let the broadcaster needs to build that picture for the viewer, and they will stay. Now,
you are an analytic guy,
yes,
at least in some of the stuff that I've read on your blog, which
right,
I think is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
You can give it a plug whenever you feel free.
Okay,
but
sounds good.
This is a problem that I have, is I'm one of the, and I don't want to call myself an old school guy, but maybe more of a traditionalist in the fact that ball strikes outs and home runs, RBIs, I can still get a pretty good read on a player just on the rudimentary basic stats that we're used to over the last 100 some odd years.
Sure.
Has analytics become almost too much that it has excluded a certain part of the listenership or fan base because they don't know what, WAR is and all the secondary stats that right now this section of the fan base gets and understands, but it's excluded the old school people that really can't keep up.
Well, and I think that's kind of really what Moneyball is all about. You had the scouting and the analysts, the analytics. And it seems like every year there's always a new stat. Like the big thing now is launch angle. Hitters trying to hit fly balls, trying to jack it out of the park. And they talk about exit velocity, when a batter makes contact with the ball. And I believe they're actually showing those stats now at the Dome now in Toronto.
Oh, in real time.
Yeah, in real time.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. Yeah, it can be a little bit too much, but I don't know. I kind of like seeing the new stats. It kind of really enhances my understanding of the game.
So, Stephen, you work at both Rogers Arena with the Canucks, and you work with us at Nat Bailey Stadium, and you take on the video board, which is honestly one of the biggest jobs in the stadium in season. So you're a pretty important guy to the, I guess, fan experience, for lack of a better phrase. Would you ever consider putting up those kind of analytics on a video board so that the common fan can see it, or maybe even think of explaining it on a daily basis to a fan base? Hey, here's today's analytic of the day, and then go in and explain it. Is that something you think would gravitate to a minor league ballpark?
You know what? In Vancouver, I think it would be a tough time because our fan is more casual. They're out to experience the sun and, come and watch a ball game, have a beer. But I think launch angle and exit velocity is sexy. It is like new in baseball. So when I see Bryce Harper smack one into the seats in right field, I want to see how hard he hit it. Like if it's going 110 miles per hour, I think that's really interesting to me.
But doesn't that take away from the call of the broadcaster? Let's go way, way back to Tom Cheek calling Joe Carter's home run. Instead of touch them all, hey, that thing left at 101 miles an hour.
No, but see, that there's a time and place for that, right? So I want to see it touch them all, great, but afterwards.
And I think that time and place is when you're at home on your computer or on your phone and you are looking those numbers up out of interest. You know, when I was a young boy, the way we did that was we looked at the hockey card, the back of the hockey card for those numbers, because we were interested in it instead of listening to the broadcaster give us the story. You know, and I know one of Rob's heroes was Vin Scully. No one tells a story like Vin Scully.
Yeah, I agree.
Never went into the numbers. The numbers are always there for you to come and get, but when you are there experiencing the game, you want to be sucked into the game, and that's done by the picture and by the voice. And the numbers kind of make it robotic, I
Lou,
guess.
can I interject for 1 second? Just so you know, we're talking launch angles and Tom Cheek. The internet was created in 1991.
No, but I'm just saying, even if you add stuff to that, I mean, stuff has happened, obviously, in modern times. It's going to change that, right? But even since we've had the internet, you know, I think if you put too much information in there, you take away from the flow of the game. And baseball is not one of those games where something is constantly happening. You're waiting for something to happen. You have these breaks in between. And that's where the storyteller comes in. And to me, that's the baseball fan. Baseball is a romantic sport.
Okay, we got to take a break here. Hold that thought, Niall, because I know where we want to go with this. But on the other side of the break, I would like to think that baseball's black cloud is finally beyond us. The steroid era is something, I think, you know, one of Bud Selig's exit things that he did just in the nick of time was begin the process of cleaning up the game. But there are stigmas that will follow certain players all the way through until they are well past the game. The stigma on a guy like Ryan Braun, I don't know if in Milwaukee it is as prominent as maybe in some other markets, but tonight he notches his 1,000th career RBI, does so ironically on a 3-run home run that apparently had pretty good exit velocity. We'll take a break on this. When we come back, we're going to discuss a player like Ryan Braun's, place in baseball history. And if we look at these career milestones in a different frame, simply because of who it is. This is Rob Fay Nation and Rob Fay Nation Radio and Vancouver Canadians Game Day and all kinds of stuff here on TSN 1040. After 8, I'm Rob Fay. Congratulations tonight. Ryan Braun hitting a 3-run homer. It helped him get to the 1,000 RBI plateau. Milwaukee is acknowledging him as one of the great players. Second Brewer all-time to do it. The only other, Robin Yount. So again, Ryan Braun in good company. Now, I know we're in Vancouver and we're talking about Milwaukee Brewers and you're saying, well, where are we going with this? Ryan Braun is a 2-time abuser of Major League Baseball's performance-enhancing policy. He was a guy that caught not once but twice. And I wonder, as we start to celebrate guys like Cecil Cooper and Robin Yount and Paul Molitor and Ryan Braun, the greats of the Milwaukee Brewers, if we should be celebrating him. Now, I know that that's kind of a jagged way that leaves this conversation open up to a couple of different ways, but I got the 3 guys in here that I think can help us break this one down. Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe, and of course, Stephen Von Voot joining us here on Vancouver Canadians Game Day. So where do we start with this? This is a pretty nice milestone. Stephen, maybe we'll start with you. Milestones, are they overrated in Major League Baseball? And do you put, and I don't even want to say an asterisk, but is there a little bit of a cloud over Ryan Braun on a night where, again, the Milwaukee Brewers are celebrating him?
There's definitely a little cloud over his head. When everyone else is working as hard as they can every day, and then you get a guy who's going to cheat and go and to give himself an upper hand, and then he starts getting all the accolades and all that kind of stuff when, say, Bill Joe is working just as hard and he didn't have to, cheat the system to do do it.
I never got Bill Joe's baseball card back.
Bill Joe, he was a stud.
The only reason I bring this up, he was a stud, wasn't he? Let's say, for example, Ryan Braun hit 50 home runs this year. I think we could appreciate it because Ryan Braun in 2018, knock on wood, is clean. But this is a career milestone, and that's why I asked the question.
If he hit 50 again this year, I think a lot of the people would look back and go...
Oh, I just use that as a random number. But again, a singular season mark this year would probably be looked at differently than a career milestone where you're looking back on his entire Baseball Reference tenure. And
sure,
it's an issue.
I mean, 1,000 hits, it is a good milestone, but I think I'd be really interested once like, say, Joe Mauer gets to 2,000 hits, then you're thinking, oh, okay, if he sticks around a little bit longer, maybe Cooperstown will be calling for him. But Ryan Braun, I mean, yeah, you can only, I feel bad feelings towards him because you so wanted to believe that that drug test was wrong, that it was false, but he basically threw, well, not the FedEx person or whoever, basically
Lab Tech or
whoever it was, just basically threw him under the bus, saying, "Oh, he screwed up with the sample." And I mean, I had such positive feelings towards Ryan Braun at first because he elected to stay with the Brewers. He didn't decide to go to the Yankees or the Red Sox when free agency came up, and he was just beloved. And I guess he still is beloved in Milwaukee, but I don't know. It just I still think that asterisk has to be next to his name.
301 career hitter. He doesn't really have many of the to steal your phrase, Steven, sexy numbers as far as what would be for sure a spot in Cooperstown. I mean, he's only got 1,710 hits. He doesn't even have he doesn't have anything beyond the average, but he is a 12-year Milwaukee Brewer. He'll probably go into their Ring of Honor and what have you. And I don't know. I just thought it was kind of curious as we start to look ahead. Okay, Toronto Blue Jays, obviously right now, although they are not as hot as the Boston Red Sox, I think there aren't many of us at this table that could look at each other and say 18, 19 games into the season that this is where we saw them. I'm not going to ask you if they can maintain this over 162 games unless you think they can. You're willing to put your money where your mouth is. But what do you like about the Toronto Blue Jays? We've only got a couple of minutes here, so I'll work my way around this table. Stephen, I will start with you. What is it about the Toronto Blue Jays that makes you optimistic that they have at least remedied last season?
Well, the biggest thing is they're doing it all without Josh Donaldson right now. And that was a big question mark before the season started, was if he was going to stay healthy and how that was going to go. And here it is. First month he's hurt. He's out of the lineup, and you know what? They're doing all right. They're staying alive. The second thing is Roberto Osuna. The kid's my age. He's got 100 saves already. It's ridiculous what he's doing.
What are you doing at your age?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Hey, it is not easy to do what he does. I can tell you that from experience.
Oh no, I know, but how many of us could walk around at 23?
Definitely not getting saved in professional baseball games. So,
which is okay.
But you know what? And Osuna, and I'm a big Aaron Sanchez fan as well, and I'd love to see him come back to the form he was in 2 years ago. And he's been throwing well this year. You don't want to say the B word. You want to stay away from that.
Blister?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You said it. Oh.
The only reason I bring it up, and I mentioned this off air just before we came on to start the show today, he topped out today at 91 miles an hour. Sanchez is a 97, 98 arm who was topping out. That means the fastest of all his fastballs today was just a mediocre 91.
Blame the cold.
Really? Do you?
Chapman 101.
That's not the worst argument.
Concern.
I mean, if that's a 7 mile an hour drop because it's cold in New York, that's
fastball is still moving a lot though.
Two-seamer? I don't know. Was he working on the changeup? Who knows? I mean, that could be something.
Could it be that simple?
I don't know. But it's a good. But yeah, you have to wonder. I mean, if your velo falls off that much, you do have to kind of wonder what's going on.
That's a really good point because I sit here and I say a guy that throws 97, 98 in a cold weather. It's a cold weather day at Yankee Stadium. Maybe it takes a little off the old fastball, relies on the changeup a little bit more. But I looked at social media today, and it was a flutter with everybody concerned for Aaron Sanchez. So, Niall, your thoughts on the Toronto Blue Jays, obviously exceeding expectations by comparison to last year. What is the secret ingredient that's got them where they're at?
I think it's the Mailey man delivers, Luke Mailey. I mean, honestly, honestly, he could be the Karl Malone of the Blue Jays. But no, they're getting contributions from guys like Granderson, Steve Pierce, Mailey. Looks like thankfully he's a lot better with the bat than he was last year. And I think the encouraging thing is they're not exactly hitting on all cylinders. Stroman hasn't really found his form yet. Mm-hmm. Sanchez has been up and down. So I think it's good. And of course, as Steve mentioned, Donaldson's out as well.
Lou, just before we get to you, Jamie Campbell, good friend of the Vancouver Canadians, put out hits so far in 2018. Giancarlo Stanton, 13. Luke Mailey, 11. There we go. All right, Lou, final thoughts on this.
He's up to 12 now, actually. He's up to 12.
So short change.
You know what? I'm very, very surprised. The thing that is encouraging is the bullpen. If you take out Aaron Loop, which John Gibbons should do much quicker, has been absolutely spectacular. The problem there is that the starters Aaron Sanchez is the only guy going 6 innings, which means you're going to start burning through what really is the strength of your team. They've got 3 major league closers in that bullpen. If they can get a game to the 7th inning, you're talking about what the Yankees used to do.
How would you set them up? Just off the top of your head. Obviously, Osuna's got the 9th.
Osuna's at the end. I go Axford in the 8th. Yeah, I'd go make sure those 2 guys are at the end. And then
Axford scares me still.
Same.
Yeah, but you know what? Though,
he walks a lot of batters.
But he's been there.
He has.
He's been there. He's got that experience, and you're handing it over to the young fireballer.
Yeah.
As long as he can get there. But you've got to start getting some longer starts from these starters, because eventually, the bullpen will wear down. And once again, they're doing this without Donaldson, but you've also got a lot of young players who are trying to show what they're doing. And hey, you know what? Kevin Pillar just might be looking at an all-star season.
Yeah, you know what?
Every year he gets better, and he's not a young guy anymore.
Changed his diet. He was going on about it at spring training, how much he changed his diet. He said meat, thing of the past.
He's a vegan?
Yeah, I don't know if he's quite a vegan. Is he a vegan full on now?
Possibly.
Huh.
Good. And maybe this will be the year.
But, Nate Pearson said something to me that I'll never forget. And we have to wrap up on this. He says, the more legs, the fatter it is, as far as the protein goes. So he's only fish and chicken.
But I'm a rib guy, so.
Yeah, well, I guess you're fish and flamingo if you want to try and keep it as lean as possible. All right, guys, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate this. This was episode 1 of the 10th season of Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe, and Stephen Von Voot, thank you for being here. I hope we could do this again in a week. I don't know what your schedules are like, but my house is your house. You can stop by anytime, and appreciate you doing this. Niall, before we go, plug your website real quick.
Absolutely. CsPlusBaseball.ca. That's CsPlusBaseball.ca. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at CsPlusBaseball.
It's a good spot to do it. Gentlemen, thank you for doing this. We're going to take a quick break here. This will wrap up Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice. Apparently, rumor has it you're going to love the show that's up next. This is Rob Fay Nation Radio on TSN 1040.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.